Since I can't personally screen every candidate from the outer colonies within a reasonable time frame, I'm delegating much of this responsibility to my team, while I will process candidates in Sector 4. Oni has provided me with a diplomatic shuttle, the Han, along with a dedicated AI, Torin, and my young lieutenant to pilot the craft and act as attaché. Babysitting comes to mind. This Lieutenant Keyes seems curious, intelligent, and also, so far, adept at keeping his mouth shut. A rare combination of traits. I haven't decided whether to recommend him for permanent reassignment to my staff. I'm not sure he has the long-range vision required to overcome the moral ambiguities of our mission. Naturally, he has no idea what we are doing out here. Jacob.
This entry into Halsey's diary is particularly interesting given that it is steeped in the deep history between Halsey and Keyes, along with the early days of the procurement of the candidates for the Spartan 2 program. Oni gave Halsey a diplomatic vessel in order to use to procure the candidates in Sector 4. It's interesting to note that at this time, a slipspace drive that was small enough to be put onto a vessel as small as the Han was very, very uncommon, meaning this diplomatic vessel was probably prohibitively expensive, lending credit to the idea that Oni valued the Spartan program above most other programs they had going at the time. Unsurprisingly, the key focus of the latter half of this entry is on Jacob Keyes, the very same Jacob Keyes from the beginning of Halo CE. Dr. Halsey picked Jacob as her attaché for a very, very specific reason. He had a trait which was decidedly rare within the UNSC. He could keep his mouth shut. During his second year of training in the Officer Candidate School, an incident occurred where 14 ensigns were killed due to an instructor's error during a poorly planned test. Keyes himself actually suffered quite significant plasma burns during the test and had to be rehabilitated for 2 months in a military hospital. Keyes outwardly refused to testify against the instructor and was nearly demoted for it. It was Keyes' stubbornness that brought him to the attention of Halsey. After only 7 weeks out of OCS training, the then Lieutenant Junior grade Keyes was assigned to the UNSC Magellan. That is, of course, until those orders were rescinded and he was instead attached to the Han to escort Dr. Catherine Halsey and help her with her task for searching for usable subjects for the Spartan 2 program. The incident in question would actually come up in conversation between Halsey and Keyes on their way to Irandus 2 in order to procure John. It's actually worth noting that Keyes was actually somewhat intimidated by Halsey's intelligence, and despite being a civilian, probably by her influence within the Office of Naval Intelligence, whose agents had been elevated to a near mythological status at this point. The subject came up when Keyes basically spoke candidly and questioned as to why he was on the mission at all, given that it appeared to be just an intelligence gathering mission and he was only 7 weeks out of OCS. Halsey responded by saying that basically Vice Admiral Stanforth, the head of Section 3 of the UNSC Military Intelligence Division, had basically refused to lend Halsey this shuttle unless there was at least one UNSC officer on board. So, Halsey picked Keyes. And the reason she had picked Keyes is because she had read his file and learnt about the information regarding the incident. Keyes had basically refused to testify against his commanding officer, even though he was laid up in a hospital for 2 months with plasma burns, and despite the overwhelming evidence and the testimony of his fellow officers and his friends. The evidence was basically that they told the Board of Review that the lieutenant was going to test his new theory to make slipspace jumps more accurate. Unfortunately, he was wrong, and all of them paid the price for the eagerness and poor mathematics. Given that Keyes received plasma burns, it stands to reason that the other 14 ensigns were either outright burned to death, or given that they were dealing with a slipspace engine malfunction in some degree, were effectively translocated to oblivion. Even at this early stage, it's relatively clear that Dr. Halsey had an attraction to Keyes. If you consider that in these pages, the sketches that she did of Keyes are overwhelmingly detailed. She's evidently spent a large amount of time watching him. In truth, some of the only other circumstances where she's put this level of effort into the sketches in which she's made has been when she's been focusing almost exclusively on some of the deep research aspects of her work. This belies the evident truth that Halsey, even at this early stage, was attracted to Keyes. Keyes and Halsey would spend a considerable amount of time together over the coming days, weeks, and possibly even months. There is at least a possibility that during this time, their professional relationship fell by the wayside and a romantic relationship started between them. A relationship that would ultimately have to end.